So James, first of all, thank you so much for joining me today,
Pleasure.
coming down to this lovely venue in London.
Very nice.
And so what I'm really interested in understanding is that we've known each other for what, 2-3 years?
Yeah.
Something like that, a couple of years. And you're part of a group, which I would say, of brilliant business leaders who've emerged out of their Foxtons experience, amongst other things, who've now gone on to do amazing things. And so I'd love to start by just, I guess, understanding how you got into the business and what that early experience was like, whether it was Foxtons or even before, and then we'll move into what you're up to today.
Well, you're very generous saying I'm a part of a good group. I started my life in a state agency back in 2000, and it was at Foxtons. I was very lucky. I joined the industry at a time when the London housing market was skyrocketing through the early noughties. And I also joined a company that was on a very, very serious growth mission. And it was a young, fun, very focused, entrepreneurial, sales-driven business. And so I was in my early 20s, so that was sort of perfect at the time. I wanted to earn money, I wanted to be around great, innovative, fun people. So all the synergy things came in together at the same time. Prior to that, I was actually selling corporate hospitality.
Right.
I was selling boxes around the world for sporting events. Actually, I think the company was called Sports Events.
Right.
And it was hideous, it was awful. Basically because everyone told you to bog off, which actually you have to get used to in life. And if you're okay with that, life's pretty good. But it was year 2000, and we were trying to sell, as I say, sort of boxes and tickets to Grand Prix and World Cup footballs and things like that. And you were basically given back then a yellow pages or a phone book or a business directory. There was no database, there was no one that wanted to speak to you, and you'd pick up the phone in the morning and the first person would tell you no, and you'd get about 300 no's a day. And I did that for about 6 months.
Yeah.
And I think I'm an okay salesperson. I did not do one deal in 6 months. Everyone said no. And I was given £50 in a crisp £50 note on a Friday night, and my train fare from my parents' house up to London was more than £50. So I was losing about £25 a week. Anyway, to cut a long story short, that couldn't continue, and I one day the boss called all 8 of us in and fired everyone apart from me and said, actually, you're quite good, why don't you stay? And I was like, you've got to be joking. I was like, this is toast. And then I think it was my mum actually showed me an advert for a company called Foxtons that said you can earn £100,000 a year, you get a BMW, and you can go skiing every year. And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. I turned up there and met the owner of the company, amazing guy, and actually another amazing person who you know well, who introduced us, Peter Rawlings, who was the MD. And they both said to me, explained that everybody we spoke to wanted to talk to us. So I was like, what? So if I made 300 phone calls a day and everybody wanted to talk, they phoned us. And the learnings that I got selling corporate hospitality was wonderful, because actually what it ended up doing is teaching me just to get on the phone and work really, really hard. And then with all of the wonderful stuff that Foxtons offered, it was great. So successful time. I got on very well with the managing director. I got on very well with the owner, John. And I was promoted quite quickly and went through the ranks. We then sold that company for John to a private equity company in 2007 for a lot of money.
Yeah, and so let me just ask a couple of questions if that's okay. So a quick story share is that my first job when I went to university in Leeds was going through the phone book and doing cold call double glazing. So my job was to book the appointment for the double glazing guy, and it was non-stop abuse. People hanging up on you, people telling you to go away, and then one day someone said yes. I was like, ugh. I just had no idea what to do because it was just about calling. But I credit that with developing that thick skin and that ability to be proactive and take rejection and keep going as a really, really, really important quality.
Yeah. And it's not just business, that's life. I mean, you've got to be quite comfortable with rejection. It happens all the time, every day. And the yeses are a lot fewer than the no's. And when you get a yes, the reward is great. I think the art is just don't give up. Don't give up on anything ever. It's like asking your kids to tidy their bedroom. They won't a lot more than they do. Don't get annoyed with them.
That's right. And don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, that whole sort of resilience piece is really important, isn't it? As to what do you dwell on? And I think there's a real balance, isn't there, between you want to be self-reflective so that you can improve, But I've seen salespeople who the rejection eats them and it destroys their confidence and they can't go again. So, and at the same time, you want that little bit of self-reflection so that you've got that growth mindset and you learn from the rejections.
Yeah, rejection's not a problem. I mean, rejection's actually good. I mean, if you don't reflect on why you got a no, you'll keep getting no's. You've got to, trial and error. We were all taught that at school. That was one of the ways you learned maths, wasn't it? There was, actually the maths, and then there's the trial and error that gets you to the result. Again, that's a life point. So if something doesn't work, don't keep doing the same thing that doesn't work time and time again. That's insanity and stupidity. Actually look at it and say, well, how can I do this differently? And the success comes from trialing things multiple thousands of times. Yeah. And then you get very, very efficient at it. Absolutely. Go to an amazing restaurant. That Michelin star food that you're eating is not the first time they've cooked that. Absolutely. They've gone away and mastered that through hours and hours and months and years of perfection. Yeah. And then you go in and say, this is delicious, and you pay too much money to eat it. And business and anything you do in life is the same. If you're making a speech, don't just stand up and wing it. The best public speakers in the world will have actually have performed that thousands of times in a mirror before they stand up on stage.
I remember I am part of Peter Knight's Property Academy, what is now branded as Leaders Inc. Yeah. And they have speakers who come in and deliver their sort of methodology in 2 to 3 hours, their unique takeaway. And I remember when I first started watching them, I was in awe of just how smooth they were. Yeah. And they had all these great jokes, they had these great stories. And I was like, I'm not sure I could do that. I've started helping agents around the UK move away from no sale, no fee, moving towards flexible fees, where they can charge a bit up front. And so now, alongside educating the leaders about how to do it, the other bit is they say, well, can you come in and do a session with our team? So this session I've now done, it must be 30 times. And I tell the same stories and the same jokes at the same time, every single time, on a 7-hour, or maybe it's probably a 6-hour workshop. And it's really opened my eyes to actually all this stuff which looked like they had some supernatural quality, which was amazing. It's just the benefit of practice.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Isn't there a great thing in Formula One? They can sit, these amazing Formula One drivers, and they can listen to an engine and they can tell you which racetrack it's going around the world, because they've been through it so many times, and that muscle memory kicks in. They can tell you the corner they're coming into. But that's elite. That's elite performance. That's perfection. And you cannot at any point think that you can create something special or hugely successful unless you have that elite mindset. And estate agency, in its base form, is actually not a particularly professional. And when I say professional, I don't mean as in done professionally, but it doesn't take a professional mindset for elitism. And if you can get that right, you can create something very, very good. Foxtons, love them or not, and it is a Marmite company, at its moment when it was brilliant, everyone in the entire company did exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. At the peak, before we sold to private equity, we had over 1,200 employees in prime central London, and every single one of them was on the phone saying the same thing for 3 hours every day, 5 days a week.
At the same time.
At exactly the same time.
Because there was a diary structure the guys just stuck to.
It was a military operation, and it worked. Yeah. And it really, really worked.
It's fascinating. And so interestingly, I've now coached a whole load of different companies, and I've worked with Connells, the Connells Group, and I've worked with independents. And the businesses which are the most used to following a process and following a structure are by a mile the easiest to work with, because they're used to listening, adapting, taking instruction, putting stuff in. And what has amazed me is the percentage of estate agents who never practice their professional job. Yeah. They never get coached on their professional job. Yeah. That they might do 3, 4, 5 times a day. When they go into someone's home, they are basically just doing what the habits that they've developed over a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5, 10, 20, and they are not purposeful in terms of improving. Effectively what they believe is that the reason that they win and lose is because of their fee and because of the price which they quote for the property. And they're probably right. That is probably the differentiator for them, because they're not giving the consumer a reason to make a different choice.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe it's fee, and I don't believe it's price. I think they come into it. It's actually connection. And if someone is selling their home, in the main, if someone sells their house, it's the biggest asset they own. That most people don't own their own companies and have the ability to sell a company. So your property is your greatest valued asset. So to think that as an estate agent you can walk in the door, spend 15 minutes trying to win the business on price and fees, and walk out and sell this person's greatest asset is beyond naive. You need to prepare properly. You need to take the time to understand why you're sitting in someone's living room. You need to understand what is their motivation for having you here in the first place. And people's motivation can fluctuate massively, and their reasons for moving. And unless you understand unless you really understand the psychology of why someone is doing what they're doing, your chances of winning are it's just luck. It's just luck.
It's brilliant to hear you say that, because so much of what I try to do with listers is to get them to understand that basically you win and lose as to the extent that the customer thinks that you are there to solve their real problem, whatever that problem is. Selling the house is a symptom of the real problem that they have. Yeah. And what is that problem, and how do you find that out? And obviously it's about listening and asking great questions and summarising back to them. And very often, when I work with agents and I ask them, okay, so what does it say on your valuation form when you go out? And it says upsizing, it says downsizing, it says divorce, it says schools. Do you think that's how the customer thinks about that decision? Like upsizing, that's jargon, that's a label, a convenient label that we're applying to a complex problem.
Yeah, I mean, lawyers are the best ones. When you read a legal document, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. To a normal human being, you just don't understand any of it. Yeah. Why can't they write it in layman's term, just basic in English? And we go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Estate agents do the same. When I first started out in this industry, everyone was talking about vendors. Yeah. And I just come out of playing sport and just trying to sell some corporate hospitality. And I was like, what is a vendor? I thought we were selling houses. I mean, vendors, aren't they Coke machines and chocolate machines? And it took me about 3 weeks to work out the vendor was the seller, because my viewing was someone who was selling their house is the homeowner, because there's a non-estate agent, but we do as estate agents, you've got to talk and think like the person, you've got to mirror the person, your client. And if you can do that well, then they'll buy into you, and then you can empathise properly with them, and then you can, and it's a joint thing, selling a house. It's not, I'm not the expert, actually we're in this together. Your motivation on a Monday might be not to take an offer. Your motivation on Friday might be, I'll take 15% price reduction because I found something in the middle of the week and I cannot lose it because mentally I've moved in and my wife's going to divorce me if we don't buy it, and actually I don't need that extra 10-15% on the sale list to make that happen. Unless you spend proper time and understand that process, there's a moving feast, there's a moving goalpost all the time.
That's really, really, really interesting. And Spencer Lawrence, who I'm going to be meeting with later on today, he insists that his team has ditched the language of landlords and tenants, and it's owners and residents. And every time he hears me say the word tenant or landlord, he jumps up and down, because they're homeowners. Yeah. They're the residents who live in that home, and we cannot think of them as second or third class citizens, as tenants. So language matters in terms of how we think. Now, I promise that I come back to the private equity piece. So you had this career up to the point where it was 1,200 staff in Foxtons. You joined at a great time. You'd shown great tenacity. You'd learnt how to be rejected. You now were dealing, because we don't do cold calling, do we? We're calling people who've got in touch with us. They've voluntarily given their data to us, and we're just keeping in touch with them. So you've gone through that journey. Private equity. Now, one of the conversations I've had with loads of people recently, business owners, is how a business can change when private equity becomes involved. Now, for most SME business owners, they're probably not going to end up, with a private equity investment. But were there any changes you saw in the business at that point? Positive or negative,
Yes, we saw quite a bit of change, and a lot of that was market dictated. The timing of the sale of Foxtons to private equity was very good. It was 2007. Markets were going.
Well done, John.
Yeah, John timed that very well. Very, very bright, brilliant guy. So the 2008 financial crisis came in, which changed everything. But, I've been talking a lot, to my daughter, who's sort of 18 at the moment, looking at her jobs and careers and things and saying, luck, we do get lucky, but you do make your luck. And there's a real fine balance in my view on that, is luck has a huge part in everything that we do. But what you've got to do is wait for the time to be lucky. So the unlucky players in 2008 had a real problem when the markets collapsed. We were lucky players, but we created the luck because we had an incredibly well-built business that could have sustained the challenges that came in that financial crisis. We also had an incredibly good senior leadership team and staff all the way through the business that the private equity guys backed us even when we needed to restructure the financials of that company. And that was proved in the fact that then when we came through that, we then went and floated the company in 2013 for £650 million on the open market. So 2 hugely successful deals. The private equity deal was very successful because John had built this incredible machine and this amazing business that was like no other in the industry. Proper visionary. But also the private equity guys were sitting there with huge swathes of money needing to buy deals. Yeah. And so the timing was there. There was luck that private equity had money at the time, but Foxtons created the luck to bring the two together. In the IPO deal, again, we had this incredible business, then run by some different people. But again, the IPO world opened in 2013 and we were ready. Yeah. So we were lucky that there was an IPO market, but we created that luck by having a brilliant business. And so you get those two things that go through together. And I'm not sure that is going to be replicated in the estate agency world now, because estate agency is changing. I mean, it's, in my view, what makes a great estate agency today is very different to what made a great estate agency 20 years ago.
Okay, well, let's explore that.
Well, I think there's also a change in the way mindsets of humans wanting to work. COVID changed things beyond all recognition. Office working. I'm a major believer in get to the office. I'm not a big believer of work from home. You're a runner, I'm a runner. If I go for a run on my own and do 10 kilometres, I'll run at a pace. If you did it on your own, you'd run at a pace. Sure. If we both went together as two competitive guys, we'd want to beat each other. And so we'd probably not run 10 kilometres, we'd run 20 and we'd run faster, because humans work well together. And especially in a sales environment. But so you've suddenly got this bit where 20 years ago you might have had 4 or 5 estate agents on a high street. Now you've got 20 estate agents on the high street, so there's too many. You've also got half the amount of sales transactions happening that were happening back then.
In particular in London.
Very much in London. And you've also got a big change in the way the rental market works. So the rental market 20 years ago, 25% of every purchase going on, certainly in London, was to a buy-to-let investor. That's gone. That market's taxation and regulation changes have changed that. That's why we're seeing rental prices. So, yeah, I mean, there is foreign money, but actually, I'm a big believer in there's a very good domestic market in the UK, and we mustn't forget, we should talk about my views on the UK, because I'm very pro-UK, and I think we're getting a beating in the markets, in the press, and social media. But domestic people were buying buy-to-lets, and that allowed high quality rental property for people that want to rent. Yeah. You penalise those people too hard and you reduce the amount of buy-to-let properties on the market. Basic supply and demand, prices go up. That's why that is one reason why rentals are so crazily unaffordable up and down the country right now.
So what's the consequence to estate agency models then? Because where we've started with that, and I agree, and I fully agree with the balance of a deal. Like one of the bits I didn't learn early enough in my career was that there has to be enough in it for both parties. Whereas I was, to begin with, a selfish guy who would try and get the best deal for myself. Does that make sense? Whereas now what's happened is the landlord-tenant mix, or the resident-owner mix, I should probably say, has now changed to the point where it's heavily stacked in favour of the resident rather than the owner. And so, but how does this affect the structures of businesses going forward?
There's probably also a misconception of how profitable a estate agency is. I think running any business is very difficult, and as a business owner, you understand that better than anybody. But costs have gone up. High streets rents are going up, you know, your tax, your sort of business rates have gone up, and so, you know, your bills have gone up, your insurance has gone up. The cost of actually being on the high street is actually very expensive now. Wages, people's expectation of what they earn in a sales environment have gone up. So in the early 20s, I could employ 25 people a week for my South London business, and I would recruit 20 people a week, every week, 52 weeks a year, and I could pay them £10,000 a year, and I'd pay them 10% commission, going up to 20% commission, and I'd give them a really, really cool car. And a young guy coming out of uni loved that. And they had to be in at 7:30 in the morning, and they left at 8 o'clock at night, and they worked 6 days a week, you know, 46 weeks a year. Really serious, high octane stuff. People would accept that. Trying to find that individual today has become quite difficult. Very few people want to do that. And you might say, well, so be it. So your ability to run a profitable estate agency as a result, when there was only 5 people on the high street, you were running businesses that might have had 100, 200 instructions per office. You could highly geared salespeople. It all kind of worked. Roll the clock forward 2 decades, and actually the employer doesn't want to come in at 8 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night and work 6 days a week, which is actually what the seller needs. It's what the seller really does need. Sorry, not the seller, the homeowner and the resident needs. So the world has slightly changed. And so I came out of Foxtons after we floated it and took over D&G, and we can talk a bit about that in a minute. But as soon as I took over Douglas&Gordon, amazing company, wonderful branded business, which is one of the reasons I went there. The first thing I did is go on a plane and fly to America and go and meet all of the brokerage models up and down the States to see how they were doing it. Because our fees in the UK were under pressure. People weren't comfortably paying 2.5-3% to sell their houses. Yet in America, they were very happily paying 6% to sell their houses. If I go to America, I get annoyed because you have to pay a 25% tip just to have a burger. So that sort of annoys me. But actually, the Americans and lots of other places around the world are happy to pay for service. There's a fundamental challenge in the UK, which is we kind of don't want to, we want quality, but sometimes we're not so happy to pay for it. If you lose an instruction to sell someone's house on fees, it's got nothing to do with the fees, it's because you haven't explained what benefit you can offer them that will get the result that they truly desire. If someone truly understands what an estate agent actually has to do to get a good result, they will start to understand why it costs a certain amount to get that desired result. So, but also in America, they had a different point where it was self-employed. So you had the brand, and then you actually had the very most talented people in the market that plugged into that brand. So I was starting to look at the UK market and thinking, you know, the costs of running an estate agency are getting higher, the competition is getting bigger, the amount of instructions is less, the fees are under pressure. So the quality of people working in a estate agency was starting to become harder and harder to get the right people. So I was like, well, how do you do that? You need to, if you want the best, you have to pay the right price. It's very difficult to pay someone a lot of money in an estate agency to do the right job for your client if there's no money on the table. And so if we took out the costs, a lot of the costs of running a business, and actually swapped that for very high caliber people, which is what happens in many places around the world, that kind of works. So that's why in 2016 we adopted a broker business. Very few people know that we launched that in 2016. Yeah, so we did that in Kensal Rise and we did that in Streatham, and it worked very, very well. The challenge we had is to pay people 50% of the commission, upwards of 50% of the commission, and run a high street business. The maths don't work. So you can't have the cake and eat it. You've got to change it. We're also then in a much more digital world now. I mean, if you walk out here into King's Cross tonight, you'll see, you know, people aren't walking with their heads up. They're walking with their heads down in their iPhone. If you go onto the tube, no one looks at the banners anymore. They're looking at their iPhone. So all of the eyeballs in marketing today are on your iPhone. They're not on billboards the way they used to be. They're not on the high street. So in the old world, you'd have a big high street office. Today, do you need that? What you actually need is digital presence, and you need people to be aware, and you need high caliber people. I probably haven't explained that as well as I would like, but my view is you need a very strong brand. you need very good technology, and you need an incredibly high caliber person. If you can put those three things together, you actually have a winning formula.
And what we've talked about a lot, certainly our business, is high skill, high tech.
Yeah.
Fewer people, better paid, with technology doing the heavy lifting. And where you apply the technology and the opportunities that technology presents today, in many ways is an incredibly interesting point. But before we go there, I'd just like to talk about your recruitment strategy. And one of the first ways the first way I ever came across you was that some guys have been, who I network with, have been on I think a Blue Sky, Seattle, so it was in Seattle. And I think you'd shared with them the sort of three cohorts of talent that you often found quite good predictors of success. And I imagine that a man who's recruiting 20 people a week has got a lot of experience in seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. So would you mind sharing that with us?
Well, it goes back to our beginning bit that, to be successful, you have to go through lots of no's to get to a yes. Whatever it is you want to do, you have to go through multiple iterations of what you're trying to do to get the result that you want. And, I did play a little bit of sport, prior to sort of going into the working world. And you realise that if you want to get selected for a team, you're going to have to train significantly harder than many, many other people. The pyramid as you go up to elite sport is huge. There's very, very few people at the top. And so when I started to recruit people, I was really looking for people who understood how hard you had to work to get the result that you wanted. That was one really important bit. And then also people who had dealt with rejection time and time again for a prolonged period throughout their lives, because their resilience is huge. So through meeting people, I realised that high focused sports people who had succeeded were very, very good at what I needed them to do. I also realised that people who had been on the acting stage were also really, really good, because, I'm not an actor, but, if you've ever met or know people in the acting world, they deal with rejection, but they also understand how they have to rehearse thousands of times for one moment. And so they become very good at putting it on when they need to do it. And then I think there might be four, because the other one is we looked at the forces, people who had, genuinely had to, people who could be coached. So the other thing is actually people have got to be coached. They've got to understand that they are prepared to be told how to do something and they're comfortable with that. So I looked at sports people, I looked at acting, I looked at the forces, and then the other one was people, which was a really interesting one, is people from very challenged backgrounds. People who have come from where they've had to deal with genuine adversity, broken home or whatever it might be. Those people that can get through that and pop up at the right side. They're really fascinating people. And so those four groups of characters, if you're going to have to go into a battle, you want those kind of people with you, because they don't give up. Absolutely. and they understand what it takes to be successful, and they're great.
Great. Well, listen, there's four amazing tips for people in terms of recruitment, and certainly that is one of the big challenges, which agency owners out there are facing each and every day is finding the right talent, finding people. And I think we've really, in the first half, covered two great points, which is you've got to pay people proper money and give them the opportunity to earn, whether that's on an employed or a self-employed basis, but you've got to do that. And then secondly, look for those people who've got resilience, coachability, and have experienced some kind of having to overcome something. Makes a massive difference to them.
It does. The money one, I sit in a funny camp on that. They've got to have the ability to earn lots of money. I don't pay people a lot of money. And there's quite a fine balance there. If you pay someone a lot of money and they don't do the result, you need to change that fast. There's too many examples in many businesses around the world where people get paid money and then sit back on their laurels and then don't get the spotlight on them from leadership. That's a real problem. That erodes culture and everything. What you've got to do in estate agency, in my view, is you've got to give people the ability to earn extraordinary money, and then they've got to have the self-starter belief, which goes back to the recruitment point, to say, I can do that.
Absolutely.
And then you get it right.
So in the interview which I did with Peter Rollins, I did an interview with him back in October, and I asked him, when he went back into Foxtons, effectively as a non-exec and then as interim CEO before he brought Guy in, what were the lessons or the things that he felt went wrong in Foxtons, and he absolutely attributes the change in commission structure to relatively higher basics but much lower commission and therefore much lower earning potential as the key thing that he put his finger on in terms of the rot within the business, which then led to an erosion of the culture. So we're going to take a very short break, and then we'll come back and we'll sort of talk about technology and all of those other bits and bats.
Changing your CRM at any point, which I've done 3 times in the lifeline of our business, is a big deal, and you want to make sure that you're moving with the right partner.
When you're not used to a customizable CRM, you don't really know there's anything different. But as soon as you've got the opportunity to have something that's completely customizable to your needs, it's absolutely life-changing. As soon as you demo this system, it's blindingly obvious how different it is to most out-of-the-box CRM systems.
No longer am I sat for hours filling out spreadsheets, which is joyous, I have to say. What we've been able to do is really get under the bonnet of our business using the system.
The business benefits that you're going to get from it by moving from something which is usually out of the box and works okay to something which can be adaptable and can really help you grow your business is game changing.
Greenhouse has been 99% positive.
Great, so returning to your career, we sort of left the story, didn't we, with Douglas&Gordon and moving to a self-employed brokerage model in 2016? Is that right?
No, I joined Douglas&Gordon in 2016. So I left Foxtons. I mean, Foxtons was amazing. I had a great time, but what made it great for me started to change. So it was time for me to go. And I drove home one night, and I think the market value was at about just under £1 billion. I think they were worth roughly the same as Savills, and I was just like, none of this really makes sense. And the culture was changing, and so I thought, actually it's probably time to do something different. And I was very lucky. I got introduced to Douglas&Gordon, which is a business that I had admired for a long time. They were very edgy in their marketing, quite controversial. I kind of like that. Very different to Foxtons, but the same sort of understanding of marketing is critically important, and a brilliant brand. And it was a family-owned business, and I was very lucky. I met the owner of it, Michael. We got on brilliantly, and they needed some direction. They probably needed a bit of, tighten the wheels and get it to move in the right direction. And the industry was changing. It genuinely was. So I exited Foxtons in 2015, joined D&G in 2016, started to look at the brokerage model then, but we weren't ready to do that. My mandate at D&G was to build it up, sort it out and sell it. That was why I came in to do it. And after COVID, I think a few things were changing. The owners were sort of getting to an age where like, we really want to move this on now. And we put it on the market, and Foxtons bought us actually, or they bought the letting side of the business. No, I take that back. They bought the whole business. I then said, look, I don't want to come back to Foxtons. That wasn't where I wanted to be. I left for good and proper reason. No, nothing wrong with Foxtons. I'd been there, done it. Had some fun, had the glory years. And so I sort of discussed and did a deal with the owner, the board of Foxtons, to say, look, you keep the bit you really want, which is lettings. I will take the brand. I'll take the brand off you, and I'll take the sales element. I'll take all the risk and all the problems that you don't want, and I'm going to go and do something completely new. Very important, though, that we had the brand, we had the data, and we were allowed to start lettings day one. So all of that was very, very much agreed, and that was great. I then put the business through a very big change around to come off the high street and actually change and pivot to an employed lettings business, which we still have, but a self-employed sales and lettings business. So at Douglas&Gordon now, we have a very good book of lettings business, much of what you'd see in a normal high street, lots of wonderful clients. But on the sales side, we've changed to people with, on average, we've got 17 and a half years experience in the industry per partner. So very, very experienced people. Self-employed, so they're contracted, they work on, they're their own business, they work under our brand. They have access to all of our data. So we have, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of data points of past clients in London. So they can plug directly into that. We have our own in-house built technology system. They plug into that. They plug into all of the marketing capability, and we take away all their problems. So as an individual, they do what they can do best, which is come and meet you as the homeowner or the resident. And they do that brilliantly because they've got 15 plus years experience doing it. And they just leverage off a 65-year-old brand with all the data and all the technology. And it goes back to the ethos, which is my belief, to do this, for this industry to be good and to do a great job for your customer, you need to have a very strong brand. That gets you in the door. That gets you the ability to meet people. You've got to have very good technology to give to the most highly talented people. And if you have those three things, it's great. So we're effectively a platform business. We've created a very good platform where we can plug the best people in the industry in. And the premise is those people should be able to earn £250,000 a year, which in a state agency is a lot of money and is far, far greater than what you can get paid in the high street. Not everyone's earning £250,000 a year, and it takes time and it is a risk. Now, we are not a lifestyle company. That's really important. We're also not a recruitment company. We are absolutely estate agents. So when we walk into someone's front door, we're here to sell their home for the best possible price. But we absolutely are set up so that if you want to earn £100,000 to £300,000 a year, everything's there on a plate, but you have to go and earn it. I give you all the tools, but you've got to go and earn it. And it works well.
Okay, well, that's really, really interesting. And from the business owner's point of view, so from your point of view, what's been the toughest thing in terms of running a self-employed business to going back to your time at Foxtons and when it was employed at D&G?
Actually, I don't think it's any tougher, it's just different. It is culture. When you're self-employed, so I can't tell anyone to turn up. I can't, they run their own business, they just plug into us. If you get the right person, they are massively successful, and that's great. So it comes back to who do we truly want to partner with? How do we truly recruit the right people? Our business is not about just getting bums on seats, and that's not what we do. That we have to protect our brand. So ultimately, if we partner with somebody, I'm putting my trust in them that when they turn up to your home, they represent the brand the way we need the brand to be represented.
And how do you make sure that happens?
We have an incredibly strong, tight brand guardianship, but also we are invested. We spend time. I've just left my PR company before I came to you, and they met me for a cup of tea, and they invite me for lunch, they invite me for dinners, they introduce me to people, and I asked them how business was going. They said, it was a tough quarter last year, but we really value looking after you and all of our clients. And I said, that's why I'm staying with you, because it could be so easy for me just to save that money in the world we're in today, but I'm not, because actually you've created what I call a psychological bond. The fact that you're sitting with me having a cup of tea now makes it really difficult for me to say I want to spend less money with you, because we're humans. And there's a really important point in that, in when you're recruiting people. We spend a lot of time with our partners. I'll take them skiing, I'll take them to Marrakesh. If they perform well, I'll have dinner with them. I am absolutely 100% invested in their success with them. And if you do that, they will repay you in dividends. And that's the same with your customers and your clients. I say to people who are selling houses all the time, they go and instructed someone to sell their house, and that's the last time they see them. You're never gonna do the job properly. You need to go back and see your client and sit on their sofa every week for 15 weeks, 20 weeks, however long it takes to sell their home, guiding them, pushing, pulling, what's changing, where's the motivation, and then they'll never leave you. So culture is there, but it hasn't changed from being employed to self-employed. It's the same thing, you just got to adjust it and do it differently.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things which we were talking about earlier is you being a passionate advocate of in-office working and the building of culture through a collective shared experience. And certainly that's one of the things that we found more challenging, is that, as you say, there's no mandate to bring people into the office, and therefore creating that even just that shared learning, as in listening to what James is saying on the phone and picking up a couple of tips. That is definitely one of the challenges of how do you bring the next generation through without having to take other people from other businesses, if that makes sense. And I think that's the other challenge, isn't it?
If you create a really great space, people want to come to it. So create a great space, and we've got a great space, and have fun in your space, and then people want to keep coming back. I had dinner last Tuesday with a very, very successful lady partner of ours, and she hasn't been in the office for quite a long time, and I spent a bit of time talking to her, and she's back in the office and everyone's loving seeing her, she's loving back. This isn't about our partnership model, but working from home, you can fall into a silo of convincing yourself something is right or wrong, or you start filling the gaps in your own mind. And then go back to the office, and go and reconnect. It's the same in any relationship. If you are not spending time with the people that you care about the most, you fill in the gaps incorrectly about what's going on. You lose that bond. And that is a problem. It's the same with clients. It's the same with relationships. It's the same with family. It's the same with employees. So offices create that, and you do learn off each other, and all of a sudden you say, well, I've got some business here, and it's amazing what you talk about technology. I'm very clear that our back office staff have to be in the office too. And people say, well, I work better as an accountant when I work at home, I can concentrate. So I'm really not worried whether you think that or not. You want to work for us, you come to the office, because you've got a tech guy sitting next to you who's going to realise you've got a thing that's causing you a challenge. He'll solve that challenge for you. That's his job. So he or she will look at that and say, I can probably solve that for you. If you were sat at home and he was sat at home, that communication would never happen. And then you've got someone sitting over here in marketing that is saying, oh, this doesn't quite work. And then someone over here goes, well, actually, if you did it like this, this works. Or the marketing person will say to the sales team, I can solve that problem for you. So you don't work in silos. Work together as a team and collaborate. There's lots and lots of people that wouldn't agree with that. I'm okay with that.
Well, I think, I visited Foxtons Chiswick site and it was brilliant. It was an absolutely fantastic experience. And again, it won't be for everyone. Some people would hate it. But what a wonderful place to learn the basics of agency, about proactive calling out, and to develop a culture and an understanding. And, Guy was kind enough to show me around, and I sort of went round all of the desks and I saw all of the different teams and the leaderboards, and he was present there. And, I'm sure he didn't spend a huge amount of time walking the floor. He's got people to do that for him. But the point is that by being in one big centre, they have a massive sense before they go off into the branches about what Foxtons is all about, and therefore they take that identity with them. And I think that's really interesting. Yeah,
everyone has to know what the vision is. Again, it's not just business. Everyone needs to know what the vision is, and if everyone buys into that, then great, they come along for the ride. And if you, as the boss or as the lead, I don't like the word boss, but as the leader, if you haven't made it very clear to everyone what the mission is, you can't be surprised that certain people don't understand or don't come along for the journey.
Couldn't agree more. Let's take a bit of a left turn and talk about the London market. And so since Brexit, so since 2016, the referendum at least, the agents that I speak to in London tell me that it's kind of always been suppressed to varying extents. And the other thing which I've observed is that I think there's a halo around London, which is, Cambridge, Brighton, Reading, places which are within commutable distance, which as we've now got this new mix of I can work 2 or 3 days in London and then I can work two or 3 days from home, that actually we've had people move out of London. Is that something you're seeing, or is that not really?
Yeah, but I think that's happened as long as I've been in the industry. Yeah, I mean, I was saying this to someone the other day. I was born in Horsham. That was where I was actually my daughter Olive, as we were getting the train down to my dad's, her grandfather's. I said, I was born in Horsham, and then I moved to Billingshurst, and then I went to Fittleworth, and we were going down the train station. I went Horsham, Billingshurst, Pulborough. And as I was saying it, I was going, God, that was, well, what am I now? Mid to late 40s. It's like, so that pattern of moving has happened since the beginning of time. It wasn't luck that Dad and Mum left Horsham to upsize to Billingshurst and then upsize to Fittleworth, Petworth. So people have done that forever, and they continue to do that. When people move, I used to have this triangle that I used to give people, which was you have price, size, and location. They are the only 3 factors that come into buying and selling a property. You can't have all 3. So what are you going to compromise on? You're going to compromise on price? Are you going to pay the money? Or is that a non-negotiable? And if that's a non-negotiable, then you've got to look at the size or the location. If the location is non-negotiable, then you need to pay more money. And it doesn't matter which one of those three you cover, you work out quickly where your compromises are. And that's the psychology that people need to understand. And so I think as London has got more expensive over the years, people have been pushed out. What I think you're finding in that halo is Cambridge is now very expensive. Brighton is very expensive. These places have sort of kept up. And I think London has not seen, well, London's house prices have been flat since 2016. But I think London now is incredibly good value.
Well, and that's sort of the point I'm making, which is I think these places have seen a lot of growth, both in terms of volumes, sales rates, prices, whereas London has actually been stagnant. But of course that scale now is tipping. And
I think my personal read on it is I think London is good value. I think it's cheap. It's not cheap because it's incredibly expensive. It is representing good value and it is a buy market. And I think people who, if you are buying in the London housing market now, I think you're buying at an incredibly good time. And I think people need to be very positive about that, both globally and domestically. Just because we have a economical climate at the moment that is not being helped by, political winds, that will change. And if you are in the market now, and if you're in the market and you say, well, what's it going to be like in 4 weeks or 6 months? I've got no idea. It's none of my business. Do it if you want or don't. If you're saying I'm going to buy my family home now, and will I be in a good position in 5 to 10 years' time? My view is 100% buy. Don't rent. If you have the choice of buying or renting, buy, because renting is so prohibitively expensive. Mortgage rates are going to come down, money's going to get cheaper, prices are going to rise, the world will move back to London. We're on Greenwich Mean Time, we work all the time markets around the world. America and Asia in the morning, Europe in the day, America in the evening. We have the best education system in the world. I know our government again is making that more challenging, but they are, and that's a mistake. But we do have great schooling. The world knows we have great schooling. We have an incredibly good legal jurisdiction. The world knows that. And the UK is cheap. And we as a country need to sell this amazing country that we have. And I think there's a lot of people that are going to miss that.
James, you are the man to give the positive news about the UK market. I'll tell you that much for nothing. It's great to hear. Okay, so I'd like to touch on technology and then ask you my final question, if that's okay. So there's new tools which are emerging now in terms of technology, which in particular for self-employed agents, I think are going to allow them a huge power of leverage. Yep. And some of the strengths of being part of the team, so working in a traditional branch structure, is that you've got lots of people who can answer the phone, lots of people inquiries quickly and efficiently, whereas when you're on your own, it's just you and you alone. So what are the bits of technology or change that you think definitely are both current in D&G and the stuff that you want to try and get in?
Oh, it's a big topic, and I probably don't want to give away too many secrets of what we're doing. A little bit, everyone's in the same, everyone's looking at this now. I think you have to have a very good CRM system at its most basic level, and that is just managing your customers. Yep. As humans, we get busy and we can get distracted, or we can have a good day, or we can have a bad day. To have that ability to, in a very old school way, make sure you've timed all the people you need to speak to correctly is there. Most agents have got that. I think where technology is changing is the ability to get machines to do that for you. Because machines don't have a bad day. They don't wake up feeling hungover. They just get on with it 24/7. The challenge is how that machine has been prompted and how it deals with that sort of intuitive response that it gets. So we are looking at that very closely at the moment. We're doing it. We're heavily invested into that. And what I really want to make sure is that if some very, very successful estate agent wants to come and join and partner with us, we give them the ability that all of the low touch stuff is done by us, is done by technology, and all the high value stuff that they are really good at, they do face to face. And I think the win for me, the utopia that we want to get to, is imagine a world where a 20-year experienced partner all they have to do is sit at your sofa, building that relationship. And all of the stuff that drains them of time and energy is done behind the scenes in a very low friction way. So I think that's where technology is super successful now, and it's being done. The other bit really is around the marketing. You know, data is everything. You know, you see lots of these agencies buying up lots of lettings books at the moment. I'm not totally sure I understand that from a lettings build point of view, because are you just filling the hopper constantly with stuff that's dropping out the back end? I don't think we'll ever really see the true visibility of what happens on that. So my guess is the smart guys are looking at that. They're just owning data for the very, very long term. And data is out there across all of our markets, and it's how you actually can get hold of that, acquire that correctly in the right way, and then how you monetize that. 100%. So those are my sort of views around tech at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's really well aligned with, you know, what we're doing at Greenhouse. So, you know, the way that I think about it is top of funnel, high volume. We want AI and automation to allow consumers to instantly fulfill their first request. Yeah. Book a viewing, book a valuation, book a mortgage appointment in a way which is crazy convenient for them. Then you go to the next layer down in terms of like viewing feedback and, you know, keeping in touch with people, prospecting. Yeah. All of those, agentic AI has got a huge role. And when you think about a self-employed agent, they don't have time to do all of those incredibly high frequency tasks and then be out there on customer. So our job is to build automatic systems which can basically deliver it, not quite for free, but close to for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to create platforms for our agents to be successful. And if we can do that, we can deliver that in a really great way, I think those will be the self-employed brands or the businesses which will go on and have an unbelievable first mover advantage.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Okay, last question, because I saw Hannah hovering a minute ago. If you were going to give advice to an SME estate and letting agency owner somewhere around the UK about the one thing that they should definitely concentrate on, start doing, do more of in 2026, what would that be?
People. For me, it's people. Look around the room. Is everybody in that room going on the journey? Are they going to get you to the journey you want to go on? Yeah. If the answer to that is yes, wonderful. Invest in them and continuing to invest in them. If the answer to that is no, change it and go and find more brilliant people. As the older I get, the more grumpy we can come about young people don't want to work hard, they don't want to do this. That's sort of nonsense. There are some absolute superstars out there. Yeah. There are people that want to go fight tooth and nail for success. Have you looked hard enough? Yeah. You know, as a leader of a business, to go all the way back to trying to sell corporate hospitality, I had to make 300 phone calls to be told to bog off 300 times. And actually I did do a couple of deals, but it took a long time to get, and those deals paid well. Yeah. You might need to meet hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people to find the one gem. Keep looking. All the technology in the world and all the branding in the world is actually nice to haves. If you've got the wrong person sitting on the couch talking to your customer, it doesn't matter how good your tech is, it's irrelevant. Yeah. It doesn't matter how good your brand is, it's irrelevant. They are not going to give you the business. But if you put a superstar in front of your client, they actually don't need tech. Absolutely. They don't need any marketing. They'll do the deal.
So I think the brand gets you through the door and the person wins or loses it. And it's not as binary as that, but it's pretty close, isn't it? James, I wish we had more time, but we don't. So listen, thank you so much for being generous with your time. Thanks for talking today. It's been really good to chat to you. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Good.